What if I told you that every morning, millions of people over 70 reach for their coffee, believing it's helping their brain stay sharp, when there's actually a tiny seed sitting quietly in grocery stores everywhere that science suggests may do far more for your memory than caffeine ever could? I had a patient recently, a retired professor, brilliant man, who told me he'd been drinking 4 cups of coffee a day for decades because he believed it was keeping his mind active. But here's what troubled me. Despite all that caffeine, he was still forgetting his grandchildren's birthdays. He was still losing his train of thought mid-sentence. He was still walking into rooms and standing there, completely blank, wondering why he'd come in. And he's not alone. I see this pattern constantly in my practice, and it breaks my heart every single time. I'm Dr. Emily Hartwell, and I've spent over 25 years in clinical practice focusing on cognitive health and healthy aging. What I'm about to share with you today isn't some trendy superfood nonsense or another miracle cure promise. This is about a humble little seed that's been used for thousands of years, one that modern research is finally catching up to, and one that could genuinely change how clearly you think, how well you remember, and how confidently you navigate your daily life. Before we dive into this, if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, I really encourage you to hit that subscribe button and tap the notification bell so you never miss another health tip made especially for you. And if you find this video helpful, please leave your questions and video suggestions in the comments. I read every single one, and it helps me create more content that actually serves people like you. Now, let me tell you about the seed I'm talking about. It's the pumpkin seed. Yes, those little green kernels you probably see every autumn and never think twice about. But I want you to think twice about them now, because what they contain is absolutely remarkable for the aging brain. You see, when most people think about brain food, they think about fish oil or blueberries or maybe walnuts, and those are all wonderful. But pumpkin seeds contain something that makes them uniquely powerful for cognitive function, especially after the age of 70. They're one of the richest natural sources of zinc, magnesium, iron, and copper, 4 minerals that work together in ways that directly support memory formation, mental clarity, and even mood regulation. Let me explain why this matters so much for you. Your brain is like an incredibly sophisticated electrical system. Every thought you have, every memory you form, every decision you make depends on billions of tiny electrical signals firing between your neurons. And just like any electrical system, it needs the right minerals to function properly. Zinc, in particular, plays a crucial role in something called synaptic plasticity, which is essentially your brain's ability to form new connections and strengthen existing ones. This is literally the biological foundation of learning and memory. Now, here's where it gets interesting for people over 70. As we age, our bodies become less efficient at absorbing zinc from food. At the same time, many common medications, including some blood pressure medications and antacids, can further deplete zinc levels. So you end up with this perfect storm where your brain needs these minerals more than ever, but your body is absorbing less of them. I remember Mrs. Dorothy Chen, 74 years old, a former librarian from Portland, Oregon. She came to see me absolutely devastated. This woman had spent her entire career surrounded by books, organizing information, helping people find exactly what they needed. Her mind had been her greatest asset. But over the past 2 years, she told me, it felt like someone was slowly turning down the lights in her head. She described it so vividly. She said it was like trying to read through fog. The words were there. She knew they were there. But she couldn't quite reach them. She'd been drinking more and more coffee, sometimes 6 cups a day, thinking the caffeine would cut through the haze. Instead, she was jittery, anxious, sleeping poorly, and her memory wasn't improving one bit. When we ran some tests, her zinc levels were significantly below optimal. Not technically deficient by standard medical criteria, but definitely not where they needed to be for optimal brain function. I suggested she try adding a 1/4 cup of raw pumpkin seeds to her daily routine, maybe sprinkled on her morning oatmeal or eaten as an afternoon snack. 3 months later, Dorothy walked into my office with tears in her eyes. Good tears. She told me she'd just finished reading a complex novel, the first one she'd been able to get through in over a year. She was remembering her grandchildren's phone numbers again. She was sleeping better because she'd cut her coffee consumption in half without even trying. She just didn't feel like she needed it anymore. Now, I want to be very clear here. Dorothy's experience isn't a guarantee of what will happen for everyone. Every person's body is different. Every person's situation is unique. But her story illustrates something I've seen repeatedly in my practice. If you're still watching and finding this information useful, drop a comment below just to let me know you're here with me. It really does help more than you might think. Let me talk about why caffeine, while not inherently bad, might not be the memory solution so many people believe it to be. Caffeine works by blocking adenosine receptors in your brain. Adenosine is a compound that builds up throughout the day and makes you feel sleepy. By blocking it, caffeine makes you feel more alert, more awake, and that can feel like better mental function. But here's the crucial distinction. Feeling more alert is not the same as actually thinking more clearly or remembering more effectively. Caffeine gives you the sensation of sharpness without necessarily giving you the actual cognitive enhancement. It's a bit like turning up the brightness on a blurry photograph. The image looks more vivid, but it's still just as blurry. Moreover, caffeine comes with some significant downsides for older adults. It can interfere with sleep quality, even if you drink it only in the morning. It can increase anxiety. It can raise blood pressure temporarily. And perhaps most importantly, it can create a cycle of dependency where you need more and more just to feel normal. Mr. Robert Garrison, 79 years old, a retired electrician from Austin, Texas, learned this lesson the hard way. Robert had been a 3-pot-a-day coffee drinker for most of his adult life. He genuinely believed coffee was keeping him sharp, keeping him quick. But when his wife started noticing that he was repeating stories sometimes within the same conversation, she insisted he see a doctor. Robert was resistant at first. He told me coffee had never done him any harm. But when I explained the difference between perceived alertness and actual cognitive function, something clicked for him. We agreed he would try a gradual approach, slowly reducing his coffee intake while adding pumpkin seeds and some other mineral-rich foods to his diet. The first 2 weeks were hard, he admitted. He felt tired, a little grumpy. But by week 3, something shifted. He started sleeping more deeply than he had in years. By week 6, his wife noticed he wasn't repeating himself as much. By month 3, Robert told me he felt like someone had cleaned a dirty window he hadn't even realized was there. Everything just seemed clearer. But if Robert's story resonated with you, wait until you hear about the magnesium connection, because this is where things get really fascinating. Pumpkin seeds are one of the most magnesium-dense foods on the planet. And magnesium, often called the relaxation mineral, does something absolutely essential for brain function. It helps regulate the stress response. You see, chronic stress is one of the most underappreciated destroyers of memory and mental clarity. When you're stressed, your body floods with cortisol. Cortisol in small, acute doses can actually enhance memory. It helps you remember important events. But chronic, low-level stress, the kind so many of us live with without even realizing it, keeps cortisol elevated day after day. And elevated cortisol literally shrinks the hippocampus, the part of your brain most responsible for forming and retrieving memories. Magnesium helps calm the nervous system. It supports GABA production, which is your brain's primary calming neurotransmitter. It helps regulate the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which controls your stress response. In other words, adequate magnesium helps protect your brain from the daily wear and tear of stress. Mrs. Patricia Okonkwo, 71 years old, a retired nurse from Chicago, Illinois, had spent 35 years working in high-stress hospital environments. She'd dealt with emergencies, difficult patients, long shifts, emotional demands that would break most people. When she retired, she expected to finally relax. Instead, she found herself anxious all the time, sleeping poorly, and struggling to remember things she'd known for decades. Patricia had been self-medicating with coffee for years, 4 or 5 cups a day just to get through her shifts. In retirement, she'd cut back some, but she still relied on that morning caffeine jolt to feel functional. The problem was, she didn't feel functional. She felt foggy, scattered, forgetful. When we discussed her dietary habits, I noticed she wasn't eating many magnesium-rich foods at all. Her diet was heavy on processed foods that had been convenient during her working years. We talked about making some changes, including adding pumpkin seeds as a regular snack. Patricia was skeptical. She'd seen too many health fads come and go. But she was also desperate enough to try anything. She started eating a small handful of pumpkin seeds every afternoon with some dried cranberries. The changes were gradual but undeniable. Within the first month, she noticed her sleep improving. She was falling asleep faster, staying asleep longer, and waking up feeling more refreshed. By the second month, her anxiety had decreased noticeably. She told me she felt like she could finally breathe again after years of holding her breath. By the third month, she was remembering details she'd been forgetting, phone numbers, appointments, where she'd put her keys. Now, I'm not suggesting pumpkin seeds are magic. What I am suggesting is that giving your brain the raw materials it needs to function optimally can make a genuine difference, especially when those materials have been chronically lacking. Let me share something else that many people don't realize about pumpkin seeds. They contain compounds called tryptophan and phenolic acids that may support brain health in ways we're only beginning to understand. Tryptophan is a precursor to serotonin, which is crucial for mood regulation, and also plays a role in memory consolidation. The phenolic acids have antioxidant properties that may help protect brain cells from oxidative damage. Mr. Harold Benson, 76 years old, a retired history teacher from Savannah, Georgia, was a man who loved learning. His entire life had been devoted to knowledge, to understanding the past, to connecting ideas across centuries. But in recent years, he'd noticed something deeply troubling. The dates and names that had once flowed effortlessly from his memory were becoming harder to access. He described it as trying to find books in a library where someone had rearranged all the shelves. Harold's daughter had heard about the potential benefits of pumpkin seeds from a podcast and suggested he try them. Harold, being an evidence-minded person, was initially skeptical, but he also knew that traditional remedies often had wisdom we'd overlooked. He decided to approach it as an experiment. Every morning for 4 months, Harold ate a quarter cup of raw pumpkin seeds with his breakfast. He kept a journal, documenting how he felt, how his memory seemed, any changes he noticed. By month 2, Harold noted that he was remembering more of what he'd read the previous day. By month 3, he was recalling historical dates with more ease. By month 4, he told his daughter that he felt like he'd gained back 5 years of mental sharpness. He was even considering teaching a local adult education class again, something he'd given up because he didn't trust his memory enough anymore. If you're still with me and these stories are speaking to you, please leave a comment below. Your engagement really does help this content reach more people who might benefit from it. Now, I want to address something important. You might be wondering, if pumpkin seeds are so beneficial, why haven't I heard more about them? Why isn't every doctor recommending them? The truth is, medicine often focuses on pharmaceutical solutions because that's where the research funding goes. You can't patent a pumpkin seed. There's no massive corporation that profits when you eat them. So the kind of large-scale clinical trials that generate headlines and change medical practice just don't happen for simple, inexpensive foods. But that doesn't mean the evidence isn't there. Smaller studies have shown promising results. Traditional medicine systems around the world have valued these seeds for centuries. And most importantly, in clinical practice, physicians like myself see the effects in our patients every day. Mrs. Evelyn Blackwood, 82 years old, a retired florist from Minneapolis, Minnesota, had always been the matriarch of her family, the one who remembered every birthday, every anniversary, every preference and allergy of every grandchild. But over the past few years, she'd started writing everything down because she couldn't trust her memory anymore. Her husband had passed away 5 years ago, and the stress of grief had taken a visible toll on her cognitive function. Evelyn had tried various supplements over the years, spent significant money on pills and powders that promised to restore her mental sharpness. Nothing seemed to work. When her daughter suggested something as simple as pumpkin seeds, Evelyn actually laughed. It seemed too simple, too ordinary to make any difference. But she tried them anyway, mostly to appease her daughter. She added them to her morning yogurt, snacked on them in the afternoon, even started adding pumpkin seed butter to her toast. Within 6 weeks, Evelyn called her daughter in tears. She'd just remembered all 7 of her grandchildren's birthdays without checking her calendar. She'd just remembered her late husband's favorite flower, yellow tulips, a detail she'd been trying to recall for months. Now, Evelyn will tell you those pumpkin seeds aren't magic. She'll tell you they're just food. But they're food that her body and brain desperately needed. Food that was providing nutrients she'd been lacking. Food that was supporting brain functions she hadn't even realized were starving for support. Let me talk briefly about the practical aspects of incorporating pumpkin seeds into your routine, because the how matters almost as much as the what. First, quality matters. Look for raw, unsalted pumpkin seeds when possible. Roasted and salted varieties can still be beneficial, but the high heat of roasting may degrade some of the delicate nutrients, and excess salt isn't ideal for cardiovascular health, which is intimately connected to brain health. Second, quantity matters. You don't need to eat enormous amounts. About a quarter cup daily, roughly 1 ounce or 28 grams, provides a meaningful dose of the key nutrients we've been discussing. That's a small handful, easy to add to salads, oatmeal, yogurt, smoothies, or just eaten as a simple snack. Third, consistency matters more than perfection. Eating pumpkin seeds once in a while won't do much, but making them a regular part of your diet, most days of the week, month after month, allows those nutrients to build up and support your brain over time. Mr. George Hernandez, 73 years old, a retired mechanic from El Paso, Texas, was a man who worked with his hands his entire life. He'd never been much interested in nutrition or health trends. He ate what he liked, drank his coffee black and strong, and figured his body would take care of itself. But when George started forgetting how to do repairs he'd done thousands of times before, when he started misplacing tools and forgetting what project he was working on, he got scared. His wife convinced him to see me after he forgot their wedding anniversary for the first time in 51 years. George was resistant to making major changes. He didn't want to give up his coffee, didn't want to take a bunch of pills, didn't want to overhaul his entire lifestyle. So we started small. Just one change, a handful of pumpkin seeds every day. George treated it like taking medicine. Every morning, right after his first cup of coffee, he'd eat his pumpkin seeds. He didn't particularly enjoy them at first, thought they were kind of boring, but he committed to trying it for 3 months. At his follow-up visit, George was a different man. He told me he'd just finished rebuilding a carburetor from memory, something he hadn't been able to do confidently in over a year. He told me he remembered to buy flowers for his wife's birthday without any reminder. He told me he felt like his brain had woken up from a long nap. George still drinks his coffee, by the way. I didn't ask him to give it up entirely, but he drinks less of it now, maybe 1 or 2 cups instead of 4, and he credits the pumpkin seeds with making the difference his coffee never could. But perhaps the most compelling thing about this whole topic is what happens when we look at populations that have traditionally consumed pumpkin seeds as part of their regular diet. In regions of Mexico, where pumpkin seeds, or pepitas, have been a dietary staple for thousands of years, some researchers have noted interesting patterns in cognitive health among older adults. While we have to be careful about making causal claims from observational data, these patterns are certainly intriguing and align with what we understand about the nutrients in these seeds. Mrs. Rosa Martinez, 78 years old, a retired teacher from Albuquerque, New Mexico, grew up in a family that always kept a bowl of pepitas on the kitchen table. It was just something they ate, as natural as breathing. When she moved away from home as a young woman, she gradually stopped eating them. They weren't as readily available, and she didn't think they mattered. Decades later, when Rosa started experiencing memory problems in her early 70s, her elderly mother, still sharp as a tack at 96, asked her one simple question: "Are you still eating your pepitas?" Rosa realized she hadn't had pumpkin seeds regularly in over 40 years. She started again, treating it as a return to her roots rather than some new health intervention. Within a few months, she noticed improvements. Her family noticed improvements. Her doctor noticed improvements. Rosa doesn't claim the pumpkin seeds cured anything, but she's absolutely convinced that returning to this traditional food supported her brain in ways she needed. Now, I want to be clear about something. I'm not telling you to stop drinking coffee. Coffee has its own benefits, and for many people, it's an enjoyable part of their daily routine. What I am suggesting is that if you're relying on caffeine to keep your mind sharp, you might be missing a bigger picture. Your brain needs more than stimulation. It needs nourishment. It needs the raw materials to maintain healthy neurons, form new connections, and protect itself from the damage of aging and stress. Pumpkin seeds offer that nourishment in a simple, affordable, accessible form. They're not exotic, they're not expensive, they're not complicated. They're just good food, the kind of food our ancestors ate, the kind of food our bodies evolved to thrive on. Mr. William Nakamura, 80 years old, a retired engineer from Seattle, Washington, spent his whole career solving complex problems. He prided himself on his analytical mind, his ability to see patterns others missed, his memory for technical details. When that began to slip, it shook him to his core. He tried various cognitive supplements, brain training apps, even considered experimental treatments. Nothing seemed to help. His wife, born in Japan and raised with traditional food wisdom, suggested he try something simpler. She started adding pumpkin seeds to his meals, roasted lightly with a touch of soy sauce the way she'd learned from her grandmother. William was skeptical, an engineer to his core, but he agreed to try. The changes weren't dramatic at first, but over months, William noticed he was solving crossword puzzles faster. He was remembering names of colleagues he hadn't seen in years. He was following complex technical articles without losing the thread. When I asked him at a recent appointment how he was doing, he smiled and said his brain felt like it was running on cleaner fuel. That metaphor stuck with me because it captures something essential. Caffeine is like putting your brain's gas pedal down further, making the engine rev harder. But if your fuel is dirty or your engine is running low on oil, revving harder only wears it out faster. Pumpkin seeds are more like changing the oil, cleaning the fuel system, giving the engine what it actually needs to run smoothly. If you've made it this far in this video, I want to thank you. I know this has been a lot of information, and I appreciate you sticking with me. Your commitment to your health, your willingness to learn, that matters. It matters for you. It matters for your family. It matters for everyone who loves you and wants you to stay sharp and present for years to come. So let me share some final thoughts and practical recommendations. If you're over 70 and you've been relying on caffeine to keep your mind sharp, consider trying an experiment. You don't have to give up your coffee, but try adding a quarter cup of raw pumpkin seeds to your daily routine. Give it at least 3 months, because changes in brain function don't happen overnight. Pay attention to how you feel, how well you're sleeping, how clearly you're thinking, how easily you're remembering. Keep a simple journal if it helps. Just a few notes each day about your mental clarity, your energy levels, your mood. After 3 months, look back and see if you notice any patterns. And please talk to your doctor before making any significant changes to your diet or supplement routine, especially if you're taking medications. While pumpkin seeds are generally very safe, everyone's situation is unique, and your personal physician knows your health history better than anyone. Remember Mrs. Chen, the librarian from Portland who felt like someone was dimming the lights in her head? She's now leading a book club at her local library. Remember Mr. Garrison, the electrician from Austin who was repeating stories to his wife? He just celebrated his 60th wedding anniversary with a toast he delivered entirely from memory. Remember Mrs. Okonkwo, the retired nurse from Chicago who couldn't shake her anxiety? She's sleeping better than she has in decades. These aren't miracle stories. These are simply stories of people whose brains got what they needed to function better. Nothing more, nothing less. Your brain is capable of remarkable things, even after 70, even after 80. But it needs the right support. It needs adequate sleep. It needs mental stimulation. It needs social connection. It needs physical activity. And yes, it needs proper nutrition, including the minerals and compounds found in humble little pumpkin seeds. Caffeine will always have its place. I enjoy my morning coffee as much as anyone. But if you're looking for genuine, sustainable support for your memory and mental clarity, I'd encourage you to look beyond the coffee cup. Look to the simple, nourishing foods that have supported human health for thousands of years. Look to the wisdom that exists in traditional diets around the world. Look to giving your brain what it actually needs, not just what makes it feel revved up temporarily. Thank you so much for watching today. If this information was helpful, I'd really appreciate it if you'd share it with someone who might benefit. Maybe a spouse, a parent, a friend who's been struggling with memory or mental fog. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the ones we overlook. And please remember, while I hope this information has been valuable, it's not a substitute for personalized medical advice. Talk to your own doctor about what's right for you. Every brain is different, every body is different, and you deserve care that's tailored to your unique situation. Take care of yourself, take care of your brain, and I'll see you in the next video.